Welcome to the Mind Your Body Show. This is the first of my one-on-one coaching calls. If you would like a one-on-one coaching call that is recorded and goes on the podcast, the Mind Your Body Show, then head to my website, jacobandre.com, and fill out the application or send me a message on Instagram. Today, I'm talking to an old friend of mine, Melissa. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
So this is a coaching call. Tell me, what are your goals? What did you messaged me on Instagram? What is it that you're looking at achieving? What are your challenges? What's happening?
Yeah, look, I guess to backtrack, like back in 2021, I reside in Victoria, and we were locked down quite significantly through the COVID outbreak. And I made it a real focus back then to prioritise fitness. And I set myself a goal back then that I had to have at least 30 minutes of any form of fitness every day. And that was great for my own mental health through that period of time. And you were watching my sort of progress because I was sharing it on Facebook. And so I started running. And I wouldn't consider myself a runner. I've dabbled in, a little bit of it where you just hit the pavement, put your joggers on and go. But I've never actually been taught how to run. No one's ever looked at my form, my stride. I've done no conditioning. I just pretty much went in it, turned the treadmill on, started running. And what I found when I started was that I couldn't run for long periods. I was having to pause and walk, and over like a portion of time, the fitness built up, and I was easily running 5Ks in under half an hour. And then sort of life has it, we sort of moved, and I've moved into an area where now I can't run as much. There's no infrastructure. There's not really good footpaths, and my routine all went out of whack. And I found that I wasn't doing my half an hour of running every day. But what I am doing is that I'm going down to park run every Saturday morning. And that's a community run event where I get timed every weekend. And I really enjoy that I look forward to every Saturday. But going back to 2021, I also did the My Marathon for the Heart Foundation, and did a couple of half marathons that were solely on the treadmill. So not because back then we were still locked down. We weren't having events where people congregated. So I did a couple of half marathons on the treadmill, and I was so shocked because I've never been able to run that distance. I went into the first one thinking I'm not going to be able to do this, but I'll give it a go. And so I took it easy, and in taking it easy, it was sort of around that 2-hour mark. And then I thought, got that one out of my system and thought, oh yeah, I'll do another one. Maybe it was a couple of weeks later, and I got under the 2-hour mark. And this being said, this is only on a treadmill. It's not out in the elements.
When you say that, so did you have an incline on the treadmill?
No.
Yeah, so typically the ground doesn't move underneath your feet. So that's the first thing with a treadmill. But you can then offset that by increasing the incline by 1%.
Yes.
Did you end up doing any of that?
I didn't incline it at all. Both of them were on 0 incline. So This is where it was, if you're ever it wasn't challenging. The distance, I think mentally was the challenge. Am I going to be able to do the distance? But there wasn't any sort of incline making you work harder or anything like that. But anyhow, I felt a sense of achievement that I was able to do that, having not gone in and built my fitness up. But now I'm on, I guess, a different path. And COVID, we're not locked down anymore. And I want to start building up condition to be able to go in events and actually do a half marathon that's run here in Melbourne somewhere. I've got my eyes on a few that I'd like to work towards yeah, just being able to go, maybe not do a half marathon straight up, but because I'm doing 5Ks quite easily with park run every Saturday, maybe enter a 10K, just see how I go when you're around big crowds and the atmosphere of an event, and then do a 10K and then work towards doing a half marathon.
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's so much there. One of the things that I absolutely love that you touched on was you touched on strength, technique, and conditioning. And so when it comes to, let's just say, for example, the chicken or the egg, what comes first? You could argue till you're black and blue in the face over whether it was the chicken or the egg. But when it comes to strength and conditioning, strength comes first, then conditioning. And you've got this one little important thing called technique or running mechanics, which sits in the middle. So your strength stuff underpins what you're going to ask of your body technically in terms of your technique, but also what you're going to ask of your body in terms of your conditioning, which is your running. And so many runners just go off and run. They just do a running program and they just run. They don't give any consideration to their technique. And they often don't also do anything to do with their strength training. And so when I've trained long distance runners from, 10Ks up, 5Ks even up, but particularly half marathon and marathon runners, they all do strength training. And one of the things they often say is, I felt stronger in my runs, particularly later in the run. I felt like I could run more easily. I didn't have pain, particularly in the knees, and I didn't get injured when I was training this time around. So strength training is super important, even for people doing long distance events. So when is the half marathon coming up in Melbourne?
So I want to be able to go in the Sandy Point one, which is run by Soul Motive, which, if I've got my dates right, I believe it's in August. I just don't know the exact date. They've got Run Melbourne, which is running, I believe, on the 16th of July. So that was the one that I was going to enter for the 10K. So I've been working towards that because, the 5K with the park run, because I do it every week, I feel really comfortable with that distance. And this is why I reached out to, because I went and I have been doing longer runs, just and I pulled up really sore. I was about the 7K mark and I started getting pins and needles in my left foot. And then I pushed through and I went to like 8 kilometers. And then I thought, oh, no, these pins and needles, that foot's like feeling like it's almost gone to sleep. And so I stopped and went down to a walk for another K. And I've been doing some research myself. Why do you get pins and needles in your foot and when you're running? And they say stuff like your shoes, are you tying your laces too tight and all these things. And I've got really good running shoes. I'm not over tying them. So in my head, I think it is what I'm doing with the way in which I'm running and the form, because and no one's ever looked at the way I've run. And like, I know that you do a lot of that work where you kind of videotape your clients running and then you're able to really work on their technique. That's not something I've ever had done to know, well, what am I doing wrong? I do think I put too much pressure on one side, like on that left side. So that's something that, I mean, I don't have the ability to come, being in Victoria, and I can't just come down to one of your running sessions at Marara. But trust me, if I was up there, I'd be down there in a heartbeat. But sort of looking at, is there some of the mechanics that I'm doing? Because I don't class myself as a runner. I just enjoy it. It's my time. I feel like it's a really mindful thing when I'm doing it. And when I say mindful, like, it's not a chore for me to go out and run. Like, I absolutely love it. And so I want to obviously work at getting better at the technique of running rather than just putting some joggers on and going out and potentially doing damage to myself.
Well, I'm glad that you bring up the technique thing, because on my website, there's now a free course called Running Mechanics 101. And so you can then join that course, do it for free, and it goes through a whole bunch of stuff. And then from that, I then do some analysis. And so you just send in a video and then I record you send in a video of you running. It's literally like a couple of seconds, and then I do some analysis on it, tell you what you need to do, and there's some key components that you're looking for. But in terms of when you said the pins and needles, if they're saying, if what you're finding online is saying that your shoes are too tight, essentially what that's leading to is that you've got decreased blood flow to your feet. And so that's what they're kind of saying that's from. And you can still potentially have decreased blood flow to your feet, even if it's not to do with your shoes, or you might even have like a sort of compressed nerve, which is then, creating that, which is probably likely the case. And it might be tightness. It could be technique, as you're talking about, could be tightness in part of the body. But in terms of running, you mentioned going for a long run. What's your long run at the moment?
Yeah, so a long run for me is 10. And obviously I need to stretch that out to be able to do a half marathon. But yeah, I'm a bit time poor at the moment as well. And so an hour is kind of like my sort of limit to how long I can be gone for. Having said that, on a Sunday, when my husband's home and can watch the kids and that sort of thing, if I want to start building on that long run, I would look to do that over a weekend. Normally a Sunday, but the thing is I sort of do park run on a Saturday, and it's also not knowing, because this is where you come in, and when you schedule things, whether I'm sure, and you can tell me if I'm right, that like a long run after a 5K on a Saturday should be okay, because 5Ks isn't really that long.
Yeah, it's definitely okay. You can definitely do a long run on a Sunday. So the way I typically go about it depends. It can be changed depending on what days my nephew is coming in. The way I typically do it is we have gym on either Tuesday and Thursday or Wednesday and Friday, depending on what suits you. Then we have like an interval day. We have a efforts day is what I call them too. There's a hills day, which is usually on a Saturday, but again, you can just change that depending on what day suits you. And then you've got the Sunday being your long run day. But if that doesn't suit, you just change it around. Typically, so I was working with a lady doing an ultra event. And so that was like a half marathon run, a 2K swim, and about 90K bike ride. And within that, she really wanted to continue to do her park run. So she was doing her hills on a Saturday morning and then going to park run. And park run typically starts at 7 o'clock everywhere. Is that correct?
Now, ours is 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, yeah. So it depends. So you can manipulate it like that, but it's completely fine to go and do a long run after park run the day after. Essentially it's about getting your Ks in. So one of the most important parts is the strength training and having at least 2 days of strength training in there. Then you need to have your long run in there. That's super important. And that can be any day. Typically it's on a Sunday. Most people like it on a Sunday, but it can be any day. Then what I like with the intervals and the effort sessions is that they teach you to run at a certain pace. So you can start to practice pacing, and that can help you with trying to bring down your time in order to run at a specific goal. So if your goal is to run X for the race, then you do those intervals and efforts at a particular pace, so you can practice running at that pace and sometimes a little bit faster. The long run just gives you that ability to be able to continue to run. And then it's a bit of a bonus doing the hill session. And another bonus, which I really like, is swimming. And so if you can swim and you're willing to swim, then you can throw swimming sessions in. Sometimes people come to me and say, hey, I'm only a month out from an event. What can I do? It's a little bit last minute, but one of the things that I recommend is doing some swimming. It's sort of like my little secret weapon. And if you can even incorporate it into your training without going over the top, depending on how much time you've got, because I definitely would prioritize all that other running and strength stuff first. But if you can add some running in, then it's one of the best things you can do for aerobic endurance, because what happens is when your body's in water, your body's being compressed. And so the way that your body works when you're breathing is oxygen goes in through your mouth, goes down to your lungs. It then diffuses through the lungs into the bloodstream through the capillary wall, oxygen going in, and then on reverse on the way back with carbon dioxide coming back from the bloodstream through the capillary wall into the lungs to be breathed out. So that space in and around the lungs where the capillaries are is being squashed. And so there's not a lot of space there for the process of oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusing through that cell wall. And so the whole process becomes more efficient. So essentially it's kind of like altitude training. And so you become more aerobically efficient as a result. In addition to that, if you are swimming with your face in the water, like freestyle, then you are also learning to control your breathing, because you're breathing in for X number of strokes, out for X number of strokes. Or, you breathe in and then you breathe out for X number of strokes, which is not happening usually when you're running. Most people just breathe, however, because their mouth and nose are open to the air. And then when you learn how to control your breathing, you then, when you're running, breathe in for X number of strokes and steps, and breathe out for X number of steps. So there's a couple of reasons why swimming is great. The main one being the fact that you're just simply in the water and your body's being compressed.
Yeah, because I think I've watched some other segments of yours where you talk about the beauty of swimming and how that's one of the best things for runners. I don't know if it covered exactly what you said then, but I do remember watching a segment of yours on that.
Yeah. So swimming, as I said, is my secret weapon for anyone that does any running in this sport, whether you are a runner, even if you're a sprinter, but particularly if you're an endurance runner. So even 400-meter runners would benefit from it. But anyone that's doing 5K, 10K, half marathon, and above, the ultra stuff, swimming is just amazing. And if you are a sports person who plays a running-based sport like football, netball, basketball, soccer, and so on, then swimming is also going to be beneficial.
Hey, Jacob, with your plan that you just laid out when you work with clients, like on similar goals similar to what I have in mind, and you mentioned like interval training, your strength training, that sort of thing. My question to you is, where we live, we're really pressed for, like what I was saying, the infrastructure to be able to sort of go and do that. Can you do this sort of training without having to necessarily be going to a gym? That was kind of my question, because I do have a treadmill. I mean, we've got weights and so forth. Is this something that, like, if with the program, that I could be able to do from the comfort of home?
Yeah, so I am currently training a lady who's training for a half marathon in the middle of the year, and she doesn't go to a gym. She has equipment at home and she wants to be able to use her equipment at home. So while it's ideal if you do have access to a gym with all of the pieces of equipment, then if you don't, then I modify the sessions for what you've got. So you will let me know what pieces of equipment you've got, and so then I'll just go, okay, well, we need to swap this exercise for this exercise. This is going to be the next best thing for this runner, so that they can achieve what they need to achieve. So there's some running specific strength training in there. Where we try and use the weights, and if you've got weights, then we use that how we need to. But yeah, we do change the sessions up so that it suits what each person has got access to. Because I recognize not everyone's an elite athlete. A lot of the people that I work with are not elite athletes. Majority aren't. A lot of the people, like the ones that you usually see on my Instagram, are a bit more elite. And so, yeah, they're going to gyms, they're doing all that stuff. And you alluded to it before we started recording. What do I do if I can't do a session every single day, or I can't get to the gym all the time? And this is something that I'm glad that you brought up earlier, because it's something that I hear a lot. People go, oh, I can't train like Jess or like Robin or whoever it might be. I just don't have the time to do that, or the resources, whatever. And the majority of people that I train don't have that time or those resources. And so you just don't typically see them on my social media, because they're off doing their own thing. They're not, recording themselves for me at the gym kind of thing. Like, they're just off doing a run or whatever it might be. So it has to be modified to where people are at.
Yeah, awesome. Because I guess that was my thing. I wanted to reach out to you. I see so much benefit in getting your assistance, but it was almost like the inner voice in my head kept giving me reasons why I shouldn't reach out. It's like, oh, but you're not in the same state. Oh, you don't have the, time to go to the gym every day. And it's that inner voice that is just like giving you every reason why not to reach out. And it's like, and so I'm so glad that we've had this call, and it's just kind of put my mind at ease that that you will modify a program that sort of best suits like your lifestyle, what you're able to do. Because I was a bit concerned.
And that's the whole idea behind the way I do things, is that people can be anywhere in the world. So I trained another girl for a half marathon. Her name's Isabel Cornish. She's an actor and also author. She's been a guest on this podcast. She was talking about her book called The Why, and she broke her hip on SAS Australia, the TV show. And so then I helped her rehab that hip, come back from a broken hip, which does take a lot of time, and you have to be extremely careful because there's low blood flow to that area, and you don't want to break it again, and it can be very easy to do so. So we did all of that rehab remotely. I'm in Darwin, she's in Byron in New South Wales, and then once she was all settled and ready to start training again, we had to be careful with all of her training because she couldn't do certain strength exercises, and we had to build the running up. And her goal was to run a half marathon, which she ultimately did on the Gold Coast middle of last year. So you can be anywhere. So all of these little voices in your head, I'm trying to kind of answer, because you can be anywhere when you do this. And, with technology the way it is now, we use an app called Team Builder to deliver all the programs. So you see what your workout is. There's videos there for each exercise, for example, if it's a gym exercise, and then it's got little wellness questions. So you rate how you're feeling, your sleep over the previous 3 nights, your stress level, how motivated are you to train. There's 5 questions. And then from there, you go into your warm-up stuff, and then you go through your exercise and you enter in your weights, and then it gets a little green tick, and then I can see what you've done. And it's the same with the running or whatever conditioning sessions that there are. It says what the session is, and then you can then enter any details. There's a little journal section, so you can put a journal in there, and there's a feed just like social media. So anyone who's doing that program can also see what's going on. We can communicate with the group of anyone that's doing, say, a half marathon, same as with footballers and netballers and that sort of thing. And you can message me directly in that app. So it's all really cool.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, because I did dabble in, these apps that you program in your goal, and then I don't know if you've heard of some of those apps out there, like your runner apps and this sort of thing. And whilst that's good, I think it's handy to have someone in your corner that's actually sort of holding you accountable. Not that I lack motivation, because I tend to find I'm pretty motivated when it comes to goals, and but it's still good to have someone to just let you know how you're going, and sort of that direct feedback. But also to amend it too, because those apps, they just push out a very generic sort of, this, and I remember reading it and going, they wanted me to run at a conversational pace of 6:50, anything no faster than 7 minutes a kilometer or whatever. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, why are they wanting me to do this? This seems so slow. And, it's not as if you can send them a question and go, why are you getting me to run way slower than what I usually do? And so, I think, just having it laid out where you can actually talk to a real human and find out why it is that you've set it up the way you have and all that sort of thing. So,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So your goal is going to be a half marathon coming up very soon, in either July or August. Do you have a time in mind?
So it is the Sandy Point one. I'll have to, sorry, I didn't have the exact date on me.
Sure.
but yeah, so that's what I'm working towards. Obviously, getting to a point where that distance I'm comfortable with, which I think the Sandy Point one, from what I've read, is a nice one to start out at, because there's not a lot of incline. It's very scenic too, so what you're looking at is quite picturesque. Yeah, so
Yeah, that sounds
yeah.
good. There's some famous ones around the country that are just known for, their scenery or for their speed, because they're generally flat and the conditions are good, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you don't have a time in mind yet?
Oh, so look, it would be lovely, like really lovely, if I could be back to a former sort of fitness of being able to do a half marathon in 2 hours or under. I think that's a stretch really at this point, given where I'm at currently with my fitness. But I mean, that would be the dream. That would be the dream if I could do it in 2 hours or under.
Yeah, that's a very good time. So what you're touching on by saying that's the dream is, I like to have 3 targets. And so your goal is separate to your target. And so your goal is just essentially like, I want to run a half marathon. It's to do with the overarching, I'm running a half marathon. But when you make your targets, this is where you get into like the SMART goal setting, which I'm not a fan of. SMART goal setting, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. All that is essentially a fancy acronym that tells you whether your goal is well set or not. And so you go through, is it specific? Yes, you move on. If it's a no, well, then you go, okay, let's go back up. So is it specific? Yes. Is it measurable? No. Okay, rewrite it again. Is it specific? Yes. Is it measurable now? Yes, it is. Move on. So what I like is, with the 3 different targets, and one is good, the next is better, the last is best. So what's the good, which, and you don't need to answer this right now, we can talk about this later, but the good would be, what are you going, the bare minimum that you would be content with, that you would walk away and go, okay, yep, I'm happy with that. That was good. I'm glad that I did it. And it might, for some people, it might literally be just complete the half marathon. Then better is something that you are happy with, that you're like, you're pretty pumped. You're not like over the top, but you're like, yeah, that was awesome. Like, I did more than I expected. And your best is, holy smokes, I just blew my mind. Like, I just smashed that. I can't believe I did that. It's almost beggars belief, and it's almost more than you would have ever expected that you could have done. And so having those 3 levels of targets gives you something to gives you a bit of a safety cap, but it also gives you something to strive for if you're already on target. Like, you might go and do a run and do, like, say, a 16K run in the lead up, or 18K run, and go, man, I'm flying. I'm easy going to like smash this based on the pace that I'm running at per K. And then then it just gives you that extra goal, rather than to go, I'm going to get to this, or you're out on the run and you're going to like smash your score, your time that you're looking for. And so you've got that higher level that you can continue to strive for in your last 5Ks or whatever it might be of the run. So I just really like having the different targets, but we'll talk about all that in a goal setting session.
Lovely.
Yeah. Do you have any more questions about about running before we wrap up, and we'll discuss everything, all the details after this?
Oh, no, not on the spot. Like, I'm sure some questions will come to me afterwards, and I'm definitely going to do how you said, there's something already on your website to send in a video of some running, look at the form, and maybe from there might be some questions that sort of stem from that.
All right, cool. If you get any questions, then feel free to message me on Instagram at Jacob_Andre. For anyone else, I know you've got it, Melissa. Or otherwise reach out through the website, to send an email. If anyone would like to do one of these one-on-one coaching calls and I'll answer your questions directly, then please reach out. Head to jacobandre.com or reach out to me on Instagram and send me a message. But Melissa, thank you for being my very first one-on-one coaching call guest.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. I'm glad I could be the first.